My brother stole my 8K light setup. I caught him on camera. When I confronted him, my parents took his side and called me selfish. So I served them eviction papers and pressed charges. Now, they're begging me for mercy. Sup, Reddit. My brother stole my $8,200 setup and sold it for quick cash, thinking I wouldn't press charges. But I did. And when my parents defended him, I kicked them from my house after they lived there for months. Here's what went down. I'm 29 male, a freelance animator pulling 75K in Austin. 3 years ago, I bought my own house. Nothing fancy, just a 4-bedroom ranch where I could actually work without some dickhead roommate blasting music at 2 a.m. After years of grinding in animation studios and living with people who thought rent was a suggestion, having my own space felt like winning the lottery. The house came with one permanent resident I actually wanted, my grandfather Francis. He's 78, built like a brick shithouse, and spent 25 years as a union foreman before retiring. The man can fix anything, has zero patience for lazy assholes, and raised me while my parents were busy being professional disappointments. When he needed somewhere to live after his apartment building got sold, it was a no-brainer. Then came the plague, also known as my parents. Vincent and Veronica managed to torpedo their entire financial existence about 2 years ago. Dad's a middle manager at some insurance company who thinks he's Gordon Gekko, constantly chasing get-rich-quick schemes that would make a Nigerian prince blush. Mom works part-time at Nordstrom and spends her days on Facebook sharing articles about how millennials ruined everything. Their latest brilliant investment? Some NFT marketplace called Crypto Art Dynasty that turned out to be a complete scam run by some kid in his mom's basement. Lost their house, their savings, their dignity, the whole 9 yards. Naturally, they came knocking on my door with sob stories and promises about just until we get back on our feet. I said no. Big fat no. I'd seen this movie before. But then they brought Grandpa Francis into it. He'd been staying with them, and the thought of him suffering because his son's an idiot with money? That got me. So like a complete idiot, I agreed to let them crash at my place temporarily. That was 18 months ago. They moved in with my younger brother Matthew, who was 25 and had graduated college 2 years earlier with a communications degree, which is basically an expensive piece of paper that says, I spent 4 years learning how to be unemployed. Since graduation, Matthew had been living at home, playing video games and letting Mom do his laundry while he figured out his passion. The kid was everything I wasn't. Where I'd worked my ass off through art school and clawed my way up in animation, Matthew expected everything handed to him on a silver platter. Good-looking in that generic frat boy way, charming when he needed something, and absolutely convinced the world owed him success without effort. Within the first month, I started noticing the red flags. Matthew would mention how lucky I was to have such expensive equipment, always with this edge in his voice, like my success was somehow unfair. He'd make comments about how animation was just playing on computers all day, and couldn't understand why my setup cost more than most people's cars. Seriously, though, he said one night over dinner, what do you actually need all that power for? It's not like you're running NASA simulations. Rendering 4K animation sequences takes serious horsepower, I explained. What I do in 8 hours would take a gaming computer 3 days. Still seems excessive for making cartoons. That word, cartoons, told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed my career. My animation setup was my pride and joy. An $8,200 custom workstation I'd built over 2 years. This wasn't some gaming rig. This was my entire career compressed into custom hardware. Dual RTX 4080 cards running in parallel, 128 GB of DDR5 RAM, a Threadripper Pro processor that cost more than most people's cars. The dual 4K monitors alone were $1,200 each, color-accurate displays necessary for client work, where precision meant the difference between getting paid and getting fired. Professional drawing tablet, reference monitors, high-end audio interface, custom mechanical keyboard, with Cherry MX switches. Every component researched and saved for over months. The system was overkill for most people, but when you're freelancing animation for tech companies and movie studios, half measures mean losing contracts to people with better equipment. One render failure or color mismatch could cost me a $15,000 project. Within 6 months of them moving in, Matthew started treating my house like his personal entertainment center. But the real problem wasn't just his entitlement. It was how my parents enabled every bit of it. When I'd catch him using my computer without permission, they'd defend him with bullshit like, he's just curious about your work, or sharing is caring. The worst part was watching him develop this twisted sense of ownership over my success. He'd tell his friends about our house and our setup, like he'd contributed anything beyond being a professional mooch. The first real incident happened about 8 months after they moved in. I came home from a 14-hour render session to find him sprawled in my office chair, playing Fortnite on my workstation with his disgusting energy drink cans scattered across my desk. Dude, get off my computer. Relax, I'm just using it for like an hour. I don't care if it's 5 minutes. This is professional equipment, not your gaming setup. He rolled his eyes like I'd asked him to cure cancer. It's just a computer, Sebastian. Don't be such a hard ass. Just a computer? That machine costs more than you've made in 2 years. Whatever. Your clients aren't calling at 11 p.m. This wasn't borrowing. This was him establishing territory in my own house. I started setting boundaries, but every conversation felt like negotiating with a terrorist. I changed my passwords, put a lock on my office door, and started working from client offices more often, just to avoid the constant battle for my own equipment. The really infuriating part was how my parents enabled his behavior. When I'd complain about him using my stuff without permission, they'd hit me with the family shares bullshit. When I pointed out that none of them contributed to bills or groceries, suddenly I was keeping score and being materialistic. Meanwhile, he was treating my hospitality like a divine right, using my car when his broke down, eating my food, bringing his loser friends over to hang out in my living room. I started keeping detailed records of the bullshit, partly for my own sanity, partly because I had a feeling I'd need documentation eventually. The pattern got worse over the next few months. I'd come home to find my computer warm, browser history full of gaming sites and social media I never visited. Someone had been using my workstation for hours at a time, probably while I was at client meetings. When I confronted Matthew about it, he'd play dumb. I might have checked email once or twice, he'd say with that innocent shrug that fooled our parents, but not me. But I started noticing more serious shit. Password-protected client files had been accessed. Project folders showed recent activity I hadn't done. Someone was going through my work, maybe even copying it. I installed monitoring software and discovered Matthew was using my computer for 4-6 hours daily while I was out. Not just browsing, he was running intensive programs, trying to learn animation software using my tutorials and assets. The little shit was basically attending Sebastian University for free, using my equipment to train himself on my dime. One day I found him watching YouTube tutorials about freelance animation pricing while sitting at my desk. When I walked in, he quickly closed the browser and pretended to be just checking Facebook. Thinking about getting into animation? I asked. Maybe. Looks pretty easy. Easy? I mean, once you have the equipment, it's just moving pictures around, right? In his mind, the expensive equipment was the only thing standing between him and my success. The real turning point came about a month before the theft. He cornered me in the kitchen one morning, doing that fake casual thing where he pretends to make small talk before hitting you up for something. So, Seb, he started, not making eye contact. You know how I've been applying to marketing positions? You mean the 3 applications you've submitted in 6 months? Ha, funny. Anyway, there's this entrepreneurship conference next week in Dallas. Like really high-end stuff. Tony Robbins is speaking. There's networking with VCs, the whole deal. I already knew where this was going. And, well, it's $20,500 to attend, plus travel expenses. But this could be huge for my career, man. Like life-changing huge. I set down my coffee. You want me to give you $2,500? Not give, loan. I'll pay you back as soon as I land something. This could be the break I need. He'd been living in my house rent-free for over a year, eating my food, using my utilities, driving my car when his piece of shit Honda broke down, and now he wanted me to bankroll his entrepreneurship journey. Matthew, you don't have a job. You don't pay rent. You don't contribute to groceries or bills. Where exactly would this payback money come from? His face went red. Come on, don't be like that. This is an investment in my future. Your future? You've been investing in your future for 2 years while I pay for everything. $2,500 is nothing to you. You make like, what, 75 grand a year? And you make $0 a year? See the difference? This is exactly why I can't get ahead, he muttered, voice rising. Nobody believes in me. My own family won't even help me succeed. I'd believe in you more if you'd applied for jobs at Starbucks instead of holding out for some fantasy entrepreneur career that requires me to fund it. You're such a selfish prick, he snapped, dropping the fake nice act completely. I'm trying to better myself and you won't even help your own brother. Better yourself? You've been unemployed for 2 years while I pay for everything. That's not bettering yourself. That's being a parasite. Screw you, Sebastian. When I make it big, don't come crawling to me for anything. Dude, You can't even make it to McDonald's for a job interview without asking me for gas money. He stormed off, slamming the doors. Later that day, I caught him on the phone in the backyard, voice low and urgent. When he saw me, he quickly ended the call. Who was that? I asked. Just Derek. We were talking about the job market. Derek was one of Matthew's fraternity brothers, who worked at his dad's car dealership and spent his free time selling weed to college kids. Real career guidance material. The next few weeks were tense as hell. Matthew gave me the silent treatment, shooting dirty looks across the dinner table, acting like I'd committed some grave injustice by not funding his bullshit conference. But worse than his attitude was how my parents rallied around him. Suddenly, I was the villain for not supporting family dreams. Mom started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people are just more generous than others. Dad would mention how a little faith in family goes a long way, whenever Matthew was in earshot. I caught them whispering in corners, conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. The entitlement reached peak absurdity when Mom suggested I should give Matthew a small salary for helping around the house. When I pointed out that he didn't actually help with anything, she claimed he provided emotional support and family presence. Emotional support? I laughed. The kid hasn't said 3 civil words to me in 2 weeks. He's going through a rough patch, she explained. Young men need encouragement, not criticism. Young men need jobs and responsibility, not mommy making excuses for them. That's when I started documenting everything. Call it paranoia, but something in my gut told me this situation was heading toward a cliff. 3 weeks before the theft, I sat them down in the living room for a family meeting. We need to talk about living arrangements, I started. Immediate defensive postures from all 3 of them. What about living arrangements? Dad asked, like I was about to evict orphans. It's been 18 months. You said this was temporary. We're still getting back on our feet, Mom said quickly. These things take time. 18 months is plenty of time. You need to start making concrete plans to find your own place. The room went nuclear. The conversation devolved into the usual guilt trip marathon. I was being heartless. I was abandoning family. I was forgetting everything they'd done for me. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, I've provided free housing, utilities, food, and transportation for 18 months while getting nothing but disrespect in return. We raised you, Mom sobbed. Grandpa Francis raised me. You two were too busy chasing get-rich-quick schemes to be actual parents. But I held firm. You have 60 days to figure something out. When they realized I wasn't backing down, the real toxicity came out. Matthew called me a sociopath. Mom said I was heartless. Dad threatened to tell everyone what kind of son you really are. Go ahead, I said calmly. Tell everyone how I provided free housing for 18 months and asked you to start being adults. I'm sure they'll be horrified. The day when everything imploded, I was at my client's office in March, deep in debugging some render issues that were making our entire animation team want to commit crimes against technology, when my phone buzzed. Text from Grandpa Francis. Matthew loaded something big into his car and drove off. My blood turned to ice water. I immediately called him. Grandpa, what exactly did you see? Both monitors, that big computer tower, your drawing tablet, even those fancy speakers. Kid made 3 trips to his car, kept looking around like he was casing the joint. Here's where being paranoid paid off in spades. I'd installed a discreet security camera system pointed at my home office about 8 months earlier, right around the time Matthew started using my equipment without permission. Professional grade stuff with cloud backup and motion detection. The cameras were triggered by motion and uploaded clips to cloud storage automatically. I could access everything from my phone app. I pulled up the app on my phone and rewound to earlier that morning. There it was, clear as day. Matthew sneaking into my office at 10:45 a.m., right after I'd left for work. But what I saw next made my blood boil. This wasn't some impulse decision. Matthew had brought boxes, bubble wrap, anti-static bags. He disconnected everything methodically, like he'd been planning this for weeks. The asshole even used my own packing materials. The footage was damning. He worked with the confidence of someone who'd convinced himself he was entitled to take what he was stealing. $8,200 worth of hardware. Gone. But unlike the old me who might have rushed home angry and emotional, I'd learned something valuable in my years dealing with difficult clients. When someone screws you over, documentation and legal strategy beat emotional confrontation every time. I started making calls. First call, my best friend Xavier, who worked in cybersecurity and had helped me set up the camera system. Matthew stole my entire animation rig, I told him. The $8,200 custom build? That piece of shit. Please tell me you're pressing charges. That's exactly what I'm doing. But I want to make sure this sticks. Good. In Texas, anything over $2,500 is a felony. Your brother just committed third-degree felony theft. That's 2 to 10 years in prison. Xavier also mentioned something crucial. Make sure you document every component and its value. Serial numbers, purchase receipts, current market prices. Defense attorneys will try to argue the equipment was depreciated or worth less than you claim. Second call. Jake, a lawyer buddy who specialized in criminal defense. If you want to destroy someone legally, it helps to understand exactly how the system works. Jake confirmed what Xavier had told me. Matthew was completely screwed. Third-degree felony with clear video evidence meant any prosecutor would take this case and win it easily. One more thing, Jake added. If he's already sold the equipment, that shows intent to permanently deprive, which makes this theft instead of borrowing. Much more serious charges. Third call. My insurance company. Even if I press charges and won, getting the equipment back might be impossible if Matthew had already sold it. The insurance agent confirmed my equipment was covered for theft, but I'd need a police report and evidence of the crime. The security footage would be more than enough. By the end of the workday, I had a complete plan. Press charges, file an insurance claim, and let Matthew get screwed. I got home around 6 p.m. to find the whole family gathered in the living room, looking suspicious as hell. Matthew was on the couch trying way too hard to look casual. My parents were doing their best impression of concerned citizens, and Grandpa Francis was in his chair watching everyone like a hawk. I played it cool. Hey everyone, I said, dropping my laptop bag by the door. How's it going? General murmurs of fine and good from around the room, but Matthew looked nervous. Everything okay, sweetheart? Mom asked, but there was something off about her tone. Too bright, too forced. Yeah, just had a weird tech issue today. I stretched, playing it casual. Tried to access my home computer remotely and got nothing. Dead connection. Matthew cleared his throat. Oh, that sucks. Right? Thing is, I could have sworn I left everything running this morning. I looked directly at him. You been messing around in my office today? Me? No, why would I? Power might have gone out, Dad interrupted, not looking up from his phone. Happens sometimes. I nodded slowly. Guess I should go take a look. Probably just Windows being Windows, Matthew said quickly. You know how it randomly updates and... It's not Windows, but thanks. I was already moving toward the hallway. Back in a sec. I walked to my office. The empty desk spoke volumes. Bare surface where my monitors used to be, vacant spots where my tower and peripherals once lived. Walking back to the living room, I kept my voice level. So, my entire setup's gone. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Gone? Mom's voice cracked slightly. Yep. Matthew jumped up like his ass was on fire. What? That's insane. Someone broke in? Oh my God, Mom gasped, hand flying to her chest. Should we call 911? Dad was suddenly very interested, looking around like he was checking windows. Did they take anything else? TV's still here. The performance was almost insulting. They'd clearly rehearsed this shit. I pulled out my phone. Actually, let's see what the camera caught. Matthew went white. Camera? Security cameras. The system I installed 8 months ago. I opened the app, and there it was in glorious 4K. Matthew dismantling my entire setup like he was a professional moving company. I turned the screen toward the room. The silence stretched for about 5 seconds before all hell broke loose. I was gonna ask, Matthew blurted out. You left early and you thought you'd help yourself to $8,000 worth of my stuff? It's not stealing. Jesus, Sebastian, I live here too. Mom jumped in with her usual bullshit. He probably just wanted to try it out, honey. You know how boys are with computers. Boys. He's 25 years old. This is ridiculous, Dad muttered. It's not like he sold it or something. That's when I hit them with the nuclear option. Actually, Dad, that's exactly what he did. I pulled up more footage on my phone. This is from 3 hours ago. The second video showed Matthew loading everything into his car and driving away, but I'd done some additional research during my drive home. Matthew, want to explain why your car was parked at Cash Converters on South Lamar for 2 hours this afternoon? His face went gray. Busted. I also called them. Funny thing, they remember a guy matching your description selling a high-end computer setup for $3,200 cash. The room exploded. Mom started crying. Dad started shouting. Matthew tried to run to his room, but I blocked the hallway. Sit your ass down. We're not done talking. I can get it back, he pleaded. I'll buy it all back. With what money? You just sold it for less than half what it's worth, you fucking moron. That's when I realized they all knew. The coordinated story, the fake surprise, the immediate deflection. They'd discussed this beforehand. Wait, I said, connecting the dots. You all knew about this. More silence. Are you fucking kidding me? You helped him plan this? Dad finally showed some backbone. Now hold on. No, you hold on. Did you or did you not know Matthew was planning to steal and sell my computer? We didn't help him steal anything, Mom said defensively. We just thought maybe if you saw how much he needed the money? If what? If you ambushed me with a united front to make me accept getting robbed? Grandpa Francis finally spoke up from his chair. When I was his age, taking something that wasn't mine got me a belt across the ass and a trip to the police station. This is different, Francis, Dad snapped. Times have changed. Matthew was looking between us like a tennis match, realizing his support system was crumbling. Can everyone just chill? I'll figure out how to get the money back. You'll figure it out? You sold professional equipment worth $8 grand for $3,200 because you're too stupid to know what you stole. I said I'd figure it out. After you got caught on camera? After you sold my stuff? After you lied to my face? Whatever, dude. You're being dramatic. You know what? You're right. I am being dramatic. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd prepared weeks earlier, but hoped I'd never have to use. Matthew, Mom, Dad, consider this your official 30-day notice to vacate the premises. I handed each of them a formal eviction notice, properly formatted and legally binding. Dad's face went purple. What the hell? You can't evict us? This is family. Actually, I can and I am. You've been living here as tenants at will for 18 months. Texas law requires 30 days written notice, which you now have. Mom started hyperventilating. You're throwing your own family out on the street? No, I'm throwing 3 adults who don't pay rent, don't contribute to household expenses, and just helped orchestrate the theft of my property out of my house. The next hour was pure chaos. Shouting, crying, threats, and manipulation that would make a cult leader proud. But I held firm. When the dust settled, I made one final announcement. Just so we're clear, I'm also calling the police, and I'm pressing charges. You're going to call the cops on your own brother? Dad exploded. Over felony theft? Absolutely. The responding officers arrived about 90 minutes later. Professional, thorough, and completely unimpressed by my parents' attempts to downplay what happened. The lead investigator was a veteran who'd clearly seen this type of family drama before. When I explained the situation, he just nodded and asked to see the security footage. Clear as day, he said, after reviewing the clips. This isn't a family dispute. This is felony theft with video evidence. When I showed them the receipts proving the equipment was worth over $8,000 and explained that it had been sold for $3,200, they confirmed this was felony territory, third-degree felony theft, carrying 2 to 10 years in prison. Did you have permission to take this equipment? He asked Matthew directly. I live here, Matthew stammered. That's not what I asked. Did your brother give you permission to take his computer equipment? Silence. Did you sell the equipment for money? Matthew looked at his parents, then back at the officer. Yes. Then you're under arrest for theft of property over $2,500. As they cuffed him and read him his rights, the reality hit everyone at once. This wasn't going away. Matthew had committed a serious felony, and now the full weight of the criminal justice system was about to land on his ass. Sebastian, please, Matthew begged as they walked him toward the patrol car. Don't do this. I'll pay you back everything, I replied calmly. You sold $8,000 worth of equipment for $3,200 and probably spent it already. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. Too late for that, brother. One of the officers handed me a case number and explained the next steps. There'd be a preliminary hearing within 72 hours, and the DA's office would be in touch about my witness testimony. After they drove away with Matthew in the back seat, my parents turned on me with pure hatred. How could you do this to your own brother? Dad spat. Easy. He stole from me and sold my equipment. Actions have consequences. But prison? Mom wailed. He'll have a criminal record. Yes, he will. That's what happens when you commit felonies. Our Grandpa Francis spoke up from his chair. Boy made his bed. Now he gets to lie in it. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in watching entitled People Discover that the real world doesn't give a shit about your feelings. My parents spent their time calling lawyers they couldn't afford, researching bail bondsmen, and trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. Every conversation ended with them trying to guilt me into dropping the charges. The preliminary hearing was exactly as brutal as I'd hoped. Matthew shuffled into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His court-appointed attorney had clearly explained the reality of the situation. When you're caught on camera stealing and selling over $8,000 worth of equipment, there's not much room for creative legal defense. The prosecutor laid out the case with surgical precision, Clear video evidence, documented property values, proof of sale. It took her exactly 15 minutes to demonstrate that Matthew was guilty as sin. The defense attorney tried to argue that this was a family misunderstanding and that Matthew had intended to return the equipment. The prosecutor demolished that argument by pointing out that you can't return something you've already sold for cash. Bail was set at $20,000. My parents didn't have it, so Matthew spent 3 weeks in county jail before they managed to scrape together the money through some combination of credit cards and borrowing from relatives. During those 3 weeks, I got daily calls from my parents begging me to drop the charges. Each conversation followed the same pattern: guilt, threats, promises, and finally anger when I refused to budge. "Your own brother is sitting in jail because of you," Dad said during one particularly toxic call. "My brother is sitting in jail because he committed felony theft. I didn't force him to steal my equipment and sell it." Over the next months, Matthew's lawyer kept pushing for plea deals, but the DA wasn't feeling generous. With video evidence this clear and the sale of stolen property, they had all the leverage. The assistant DA called with regular updates. His situation got worse when they discovered he'd spent the $3,200 from the sale on stupid shit: designer clothes, expensive dinners, a PlayStation 5. The DA's office also discovered that Matthew had been researching pawn shops and Facebook Marketplace for weeks before the theft, looking up values for computer components and reading about how to sell electronics quickly for cash. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was premeditated larceny. His lawyer pushed for a deal: 18 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and full restitution in exchange for pleading guilty to a reduced charge. The prosecutor thought it was fair for a first-time offender, but mentioned that if we went to trial and won, he'd probably get 3 to 5 years in state prison. I told them to reject the plea offer and go to trial. The decision sent shockwaves through my family. Mom begged me to accept the plea deal, claiming 18 months was already too much punishment. Dad threatened to disown me if I destroyed Matthew's future by pushing for a trial. 18 months is a gift, I told them. He committed a felony. He should be grateful they're not throwing the book at him. But the most satisfying reaction came from Matthew himself. His lawyer arranged a meeting at the jail, hoping I'd be willing to accept the plea deal to keep the family together. Seeing him in his orange jumpsuit, unshaven and defeated, was exactly as satisfying as I'd imagined. "Sebastian," he started, barely making eye contact, "I screwed up. I know that now." "Do you?" "Yes, Christ, 2 months in here has been... I never want to go through this again." "Then you shouldn't have stolen and sold my equipment. Please, just..." "The prosecutor said if we go to trial, I could get 5 years." 5 freaking years? He was starting to panic. "I'll pay you back every cent, I'll do anything. Just please take the plea deal." I leaned back in my chair. "You know what's funny? If you just asked to borrow the computer, I probably would have said yes." "Really? Really? But you didn't ask. You stole it, sold it, and when I caught you, you tried to make it my fault." I stood up. "That's not borrowing, Matthew. That's who you are." "But 5 years will ruin my entire life?" "Your life was already ruined. Now it's just official." I walked out, leaving him crying in his orange jumpsuit. 9 months after the arrest, we finally got to trial. The case had dragged on because Matthew kept firing lawyers, hoping to find someone who could work miracles. His third attorney was actually competent, but even she couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence against him. Video footage, receipts, witness testimony, and proof of sale made this an open and shut case. The trial lasted 4 days and was a complete massacre. The prosecution's case was airtight. I testified for 3 hours, walking through the timeline, explaining the value of the stolen equipment, and describing how I'd supported Matthew and my parents for 18 months despite their not contributing anything. The cross-examination was brutal for Matthew. His attorney tried to paint me as vindictive and cruel, asking why I couldn't have handled this as a family matter. I pointed out that when someone steals over $8,000 from you and sells it, you call the police. The relationship doesn't change the crime. Matthew didn't testify. His lawyer knew he'd get destroyed on cross-examination. The defense's entire strategy was trying to generate sympathy. Matthew was young, unemployed, struggling to find his place in the world. But the prosecutor demolished that narrative by showing the jury exactly how Matthew had spent the stolen money. Luxury purchases and entertainment, not necessities. The jury was out for about 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The look on Matthew's face when the verdict was read was worth every minute of this process. Sentencing was set for 3 weeks later. My parents spent that time in complete meltdown mode, begging me to write a letter asking for leniency. I told them both to go screw themselves. "Please," Mom cried during one of her calls. The judge will listen to you. Just ask for mercy. Mercy? He stole $8,000 worth of my equipment and sold it. He showed me no mercy. Sentencing day was beautiful. The judge had clearly done her homework and wasn't buying any sob stories. She laid out how Matthew had been convicted of stealing over $8,000 worth of property from his brother, who had provided him free housing, then selling that property for profit. Then came the hammer. 3 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, plus full restitution of $8,200 plus court costs. Matthew collapsed like he'd been shot. My parents started sobbing. The bailiff moved in to take him back into custody. As they led him away in shackles, he looked back at me one last time. No anger, no defiance, just the broken expression of someone who'd finally learned that actions have consequences. I felt nothing but satisfaction. 18 months later, the house is peaceful again. Matthew is settling into his new life at the Huntsville unit, probably learning valuable lessons about respecting other people's property. My parents found a shitty apartment after burning through what little savings they had left on legal fees. They're bitter as hell and barely speak to me, which honestly feels like a blessing. The eviction was handled professionally through the courts. They tried to fight it, claiming I couldn't evict family, but the law doesn't give a shit about blood relations when you're not paying rent. Grandpa Francis stayed with me, of course. He'd been disgusted by their behavior and made it clear he wanted nothing to do with them. Thieves and enablers, he called them. Hard to argue with that assessment. The criminal restitution order means Matthew will be paying me back with interest for years, assuming he ever gets a job again with a felony conviction. But the real satisfaction came from watching the domino effect of his conviction. Matthew's mugshot and conviction became a public record that follows him forever. Every job application, every background check, every attempt to rebuild his life includes the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And the answer will always be yes. His college friends found out through social media. His ex-girlfriend posted about dodging a bullet when she learned about his conviction. A few of his fraternity brothers shared the news in their group chat with laughing emojis. I also found out later that Matthew had been researching how to fence stolen electronics for weeks before the theft. During the investigation, police discovered Google searches for sell computer parts cache, how to remove serial numbers, and pawn shop policies. This wasn't impulse theft. This was premeditated larceny. Text messages recovered from his phone showed he'd been complaining to friends about how rich I was and how I owed him for all the shit I'd put the family through. In his mind, my success was somehow unfair, and he was justified in taking what he thought I owed him. But my favorite part was the letter I got from him after 6 months in prison. Sebastian, prison is hell. The other inmates found out I'm here for stealing from family, which makes me lower than shit in here. I've had time to think about what I did, and you were right. If I'd just asked, you probably would have said yes. Instead, I decided to become a thief. I'm not asking for forgiveness or visits. I just wanted you to know I finally get it. I'll pay you back every cent when I get out, even if it takes decades. I'm sorry for everything. Matthew. I read it once, then threw it in the trash. Grandpa Francis and I have settled into a comfortable routine of mutual respect and shared responsibilities. He fixes things around the house, I handle the bills, and neither of us has to worry about entitled family members stealing our shit or treating us like ATMs. My animation setup has been completely rebuilt with the insurance money and restitution payments, better security, and better hardware. Xavier came over last week to see the new setup. So, any regrets about pressing charges? None. Good. Family that steals from you isn't family worth having. Hard to argue with that logic. As for me, I sleep peacefully in my quiet house with my upgraded animation workstation and my clear conscience. Now tell me, what would you do if your family stole from you?